This is John Young with the Disc Jockey News and Disc Jockey News TV, and it is Tuesday night, which is Tuesday night with Ben Stowe. Good evening, Ben.
Good evening, John. It's like Taco Tuesday, but better.
But better because, well, you're here, and that makes everybody's day much better.
I don't know. I'm a big fan of tacos, so
That's true. Tacos are pretty good. But we'll just say you're better than tacos for tonight, at least.
all right.
Or something
Hey,
like
we're
that.
free. We're free.
There we go. And you get what you pay for. Wait, no. That's okay. But it's Tuesday night. It's time to answer some of the questions. And we had some questions about wiring. And we're going to get into that tonight. But first off, we need to check out the T-shirt of the week. Ben, what do we got this week?
Well, let's see if we can get in the shot. There we go.
Run DMX. Nice. Nice.
Love to my friend Mikey Mike. He was the inspiration for the shirt. Anyway, so with thanks to guys like him and their ideas and their inspirations, or just their links to great shirts on the internet, I think we can do a different one every week. I think my closet will hold out.
Well, so far we're 3 for 3.
3 for 3.
3 for 3. We'll see how far we go, and as soon as the first person catches you repeating, they'll maybe win a T-shirt or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll see what we can do for it.
Get this one right after the show.
Nice. Wait, it's winter in northern Minnesota. You need to keep warm, so maybe, yeah. Summertime, you can get this. Okay. Anyway, we need to get to our topics tonight. It's wiring, and we've got some questions about wiring. Let's start, Ben, talking about one of the big questions a lot of DJs have. XLR, we've got mic cable and that handles the audio, and we've got DMX. I've heard you talk about that. Can you kind of go through what is the difference between the two?
Well, one of the things that just makes me just grinds my gears, I guess, to quote the great Peter Griffin, is that XLR is a connector. It's not a cable. It's what's in between the connectors that makes the difference, really. And an XLR connector is the same for DMX as it is for mic. Now, the DMX standard calls for a 5-pin versus the 3-pin that you see here. But of course, we see a lot of 3-pin DMX being used on DJ level fixtures and that sort of thing. So an XLR is an XLR is an XLR. But what goes between the connectors, that's where the difference is. The big difference between an analog microphone signal or an analog line audio signal going out to your powered speakers and a DMX signal is exactly that the analog signal is an analog signal and a DMX signal is digital. In fact, that's its first name. Digital multiplex is what DMX stands for. As such, the type of signal is going to dictate the ideal form of cable to get the signal from point A to point B. In a perfect world, the signal would arrive exactly the way we sent it.
Sure.
We don't live in a perfect world. So the job of the cable is to get that signal as close to as possible to the original on the other end.
Okay.
Alter it as little as we can, manage.
Sure. So is one, if you're looking at analog to digital, is one more susceptible to interference and becoming corrupt, for lack of a better way to describe it, than the other?
Well, we could get into some pretty heavy electrical engineering topics here, and
let's keep it for those of us who are we passed 8th grade after the 4th time, so let's just keep it at our level.
Hey, I was the 8th grade dodgeball champion 3 years in a row. So
nice. I wasn't.
8th grade, best 3 years of my life. No. To try to keep it, and bearing in mind that week 1 somebody said, "Boy, he gets into geek mode really fast."
Yeah, I saw that one.
To that viewer, I took it as a compliment, but I don't really have any other mode. Actually, it's not a matter of getting into the mode. I'm just, whatever. But never mind what's more susceptible to interference and that sort of thing, because it really is irrelevant.
Okay.
I mean, the analog audio signal is an analog audio signal, and DMX is a digital signal. Because of the types of signals and the way that they're propagated, I guess I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of the differences in the cable. With a analog audio signal, we want to have a higher impedance, a lower impedance and a higher capacitance as opposed to a DMX cable. On a DMX cable, we want to have a higher impedance and a lower capacitance. So That's one of the big fundamental differences. With DMX, we're sending, these ones and zeros, which makes up a digital signal, and we're sending them at a rate of about 250,000 bits per second. We want to make sure that we preserve those electrical pulses. Really, trying to think of a eighth grade way to describe it.
Sure.
These ons and offs basically are what ones and zeros are, and by definition, capacitance is going to try to smooth those out. So we don't want that. And then it gets into the characteristic impedance and those sorts of fun things. But to keep it in the ultra simple realm, the impedance and the capacitance are two fundamentally different characteristics for those two different types of signals. At risk of really opening a can of worms, there is also digital audio like AES-3 and those sorts of things, EBU, and those use the same type of cable as DMX because they are a digital signal. It really blurs the lines for people, but not too many DJs are using AES EBU or something on a regular basis.
I've heard of, but yeah, not in the DJ.
Yeah, no,
virtually at all. Just install. I've heard that used a little bit.
Yeah, install, studio tour. And not to say that some DJs don't, but I think we're now getting into a more advanced user at that.
Yeah, exactly. So now between the two wires, is one a higher quality copper, for lack of a better way to describe it? Is it a different braiding? I mean, what's the nuts and bolts? I mean, what's the really difference between the two?
Well, you asked some good questions, with regard to braiding and that sorts of things. And I think the best way to answer that is we're just going to kind of cut some wires open and get underneath the hood.
Okay. Because
the DMX signal, is much more vulnerable to higher frequency interference, like RFI and those sorts of things. We're not only going to find a braided shield, which we'll take a look at here in a second. We're also going to find a foil shield on a good quality DMX cable, and that's going to, the braided shield is going to help deal with our EMF interference, and the foil shield is going to help deal with our RFI interference, and it's going to protect that signal. We're not as concerned with that with an analog audio signal, because those things are happening well outside the audible range, signal that it's carrying.
I gotcha.
And again, I'm trying to think eighth grade here, but there's, I guess, when people talk about using a mic cable for DMX, generally the reason is because they want to use a cheaper cable. And the reality is that a quality mic cable should cost more than a quality DMX cable. It's going to probably have a thicker jacket and thicker conductors. And so the reality is, if you're buying a cheaper cable, that's what you're getting. You're getting a cheaper cable, and that's going to probably be detrimental to your DMX signal, in addition to the fact that it's engineered as the wrong cable. People ask, well, can I use a mic cable for DMX or can I use a DMX cable for mic? Is it okay to go one way or the other? And the best answer is no. Use the right cable for the job. Use a mic cable for mic and use a DMX cable for DMX, and don't intermix them for the best results.
Right.
So let's get under the hood here.
Yeah, if you got some there.
And this is one of our very own Platinum Series microphone cables, and I'll turn this into a sales pitch for a second, but I'm very proud of these, and we spent a lot of time engineering these. The jacket's hard to get off, which I'm proud of, but I don't know how well that's going to show up on the camera, but you see there's your braided shield.
Yep, looks like, we can see that.
And you can see how tight that braid is. About the highest braid you can have is a 95%. There's still going to be some holes in there just by virtue of it being a braid. But this one is really pretty tight. And inside the braid, we're going to have some other things going on. Our conductors, namely, but also some, fibers and things like that give strength to the cable. One of the really neat characteristics of our Platinum Series audio cable is that instead of taking this braid and trying to twist it into a wire, which is what happens 90% of the time on other cables, we have a separate ground wire inside here. So we can keep our braided shield intact all the way to the connector, and that really gives this a lot of rejection of the nasty things trying to get into your signal. And then another thing, and I'm not going to strip this out all the way so that you can tell, but you can kind of see here these conductors are twisted together.
Yeah.
And that twist continues down the cable, and what happens then is anything that does manage to get past our braid and get into our signal is going to arrive at both conductors in opposing phase, at completely 180 degrees phase, and it's going to cancel itself out.
Nice.
So a fun little thing called common mode rejection, actually. All right, now by comparison, let's take a look at a.
Well, now Ben, before you jump ahead too far, now with the ground wire and your common mode of rejection, that will allow you to run a longer wire and successfully reject more outside interference than one without those components. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's first of all a balanced audio signal as opposed to an unbalanced signal, which we'll try to touch on maybe a little later if we've got time. Is going to give you the opportunity to carry that signal further without problems. But certainly that twist helps because anytime you do something over an extended period of time, you increase the risk of things you don't want to happen. For example, if you're driving down the road, the longer you speed, the better the chance you're going to get caught, right? Sure. The same thing here, that the longer we run that cable, the greater we're gonna have exposure to interference and things that we don't want in the signal. And
sure.
That helps mitigate it, absolutely.
Okay, let's continue then. You're going to show us the...
Okay, so and maybe you can come back later in editing and do some kind of a cool side-by-side. I don't know if that's possible, so viewers, if it doesn't happen, I'm sorry. It's what happens when you do, the semi-live here. So this is a... It was marketed as a premium grade cable in a music store. It's not. Anyway, so I don't know how else to say it, but that's the difficulty. When you're looking at it, you say, well, I don't know, it's got black rubber jacket, says professional on it, must be good. I feel for the viewers. It's, I guess maybe everybody will start carrying around wire cutters now and just cutting cables open in the store,
That'll go over well.
You just start a riot.
Oh, this is junk.
Well, right. Well, and it is. Right off the get-go, we could see that this is not a braided shield.
Now, we're looking at, this was listed as an audio then?
Yeah, this is another audio cable.
Okay.
It was marketed as a premium audio cable. But, you're being marketed, with one thing, but you're actually buying engineering. And at the end of the day, if the engineering isn't there, all the words in the world don't change that.
And that's just little copper filaments or little wires just wrapped around there, isn't it?
Yeah, cleverly enough, this is called a spiral shield.
Okay.
So, as opposed to that super tight braid that we saw, earlier, this obviously is going to allow for more nasties into our signal. And it doesn't take much to pull that guy off. And then look at inside. He's got a little bit of string. And these wires do appear to be twisted, so that's a plus. But I mean, really, it's pretty wimpy. There's a whole lot of difference going on there.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see the conductors are much smaller. And it is what it is.
Yeah.
We got a meager shield. We don't have a separate ground. They would take and twist these into into what become your ground conductor, and then solder that on. So you'd end up with something like that.
Sure.
And then, just for fun, we've got a DMX cable over here as well.
Yeah.
And again, they are different. It amazes me that I see this come up again and again, and I think to myself, DMX first came around in about 1986, became recognized as a standard in the industry in 1991. It's 2014. It's 23 years later, and we're still debating this.
We're slow.
There is no debate. There never was a debate.
Yeah.
I don't mind at all people want to learn. I mind the people who continue to try to perpetuate things that aren't true for whatever reason, whether it's personal gain or I don't know. But if you're one of those people, stop it. Just knock it off. Do you know what you do to my Facebook? Every time you do that, somebody messages me and a kitten dies. So don't do that. I didn't kill it.
If you have comments, send those to. Okay.
Every time you see somebody using light cable, put up the bat signal. I'll be right there.
Send those messages. Okay.
I don't get a royalty for every DMX cable sold. I really don't. I do want to see people have the best, results in their shows. But honest to goodness, I don't care what you use. It's up to you, and you'll have to deal with that. Yeah. I do see people sometimes say, well, in tours they don't use. Listen, I've worked on I don't know, hundreds of tours. Some of the biggest names. I have never in my career, I've never seen a microphone cable used for lighting, not for DMX. I have. So for what it's worth.
Yep. So show us the DMX.
Yeah, all right.
Cable for DMX.
Whew.
Get off that soapbox, man.
I need a paper bag to breathe in,
Deep breath. Count to 10, man. Count to 10.
I'm sorry if I made everybody dizzy out there. All right. So here's our DMX cable. Jack, it's also tough to get off this one. Oh. By the way, this is a NLFX Platinum Series DMX cable.
Yeah, there you go.
Shameless promotion.
There we go. Now it's looking like a braid, a very tight braid.
Very tight braid. And inside that braid, we'll just break this apart real quick.
Foil?
Yep, foil shield.
Oh, wow.
Because again, we're concerned not only with the EMF, but also the RFI. Those higher frequency interferences that are not as much of a concern for us in audio are more of a concern with a DMX. And inside that, we'll peel that foil shield back here.
Now, does that foil shield replace the ground wire, or?
No, not at all.
Oh, wow.
So we still have that ground. It just kind of shunts that away, and then we've got this. This kind of gives the cable some strength when you're pulling on it and that sort of things. Helps keep it. Yeah, that's why we've got some of these fibers and things in here.
Yep.
We've got, and then here again we can see that these conductors are twisted.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing we notice, and we'll just kind of pull these apart. This goes back to why a DMX cable usually is cheaper than a mic cable. If they're both quality, these conductors are much smaller.
Oh yeah, like the gauge, much different.
Yeah, 20 gauge, 24 gauge. It's it's actually I think we use 22 gauge in our DMX. But anyway, it's a smaller conductor.
Right.
So there's there you go, under the hood. There's the difference between microphone and DMX cable. And bottom line, they're engineered for different purposes. Again, with the goal in mind to get the signal to the other end as close to what we sent as possible. And do what you want. But if you invested the time to watch this, you can kind of take that away to say, look, they're different, and one will do a better job than the other depending on the signal you're trying to run.
Sure. Well, earlier you touched on DMX, a 3-pin, which is very common in a DJ, and a 5-pin. What is the difference between the two? Besides, one is in a DJ and one is more professional. What signals carried? What have you? Kind of go through that for us.
Well, here again, it's become kind of a long and winding road, and it isn't really. So, the long and the short of it is that DMX requires a 5-pin XLR, like so.
Okay.
And I appreciate the heads up on some of the topics we're going to talk about. So I did grab a few props a few minutes before.
Nice.
I kind of hastily ran around and grabbed things, and so as you asked the questions, I'm glad that I have the right things here to answer them. But just for those who want to see the comparison, we see both a 5-pin and a 3-pin here.
Now it looks like the little conductors are much smaller in the 5-pin.
Yeah, you basically got to get them in the same amount of space. And if I had thought about it, we also have 6-pin that we use for two-channel party line intercom, and I could have grabbed one of those to show. But imagine this with one more pin.
Nice.
And obviously you got to make the pins smaller to get them inside there. So
now with the extra 2 pins going to 5, is it carrying more information back and forth, or is it return information, or what are the extra 2 used for typically? Well,
here we go again. The correct answer to every engineering question is it depends.
I'm going to someday ask you a simple question. I'll get a simple answer.
Maybe.
What color is that sky again, Ben?
It's blue because the shorter wavelengths of blue light scatter in the atmosphere. We answered that last episode.
Last week, beautiful picture. Got to check out last week's show.
Yeah, sadly, I really do know that kind of stuff. What we didn't talk about last week is the Doppler effect, and that's how we now are finding remote planets. Is that as planets orbit a star, they have a gravitational effect on the star, and it causes the star to wobble. And as the star comes towards us and goes away from us in the wobble, it causes the light waves to shift to blue to red and blue to red. Fun experiment for your readers, and then we'll get back to the DMX question, is shine a light against a wall, make it red, and then flip immediately to blue, and you'll notice that it appears the wall is moving towards or away from you as you flip back between blue and red. And that's the Doppler effect. So we didn't cover that with the sky beam and all that.
We didn't.
Sense, but anyway, just a fun little, and it's lighting related. It's useful.
It is. That sounds like an experiment we need to do some evening on camera to see if we can see that.
Yeah, and you know, probably no coincidence 3D glasses are blue and red, but
but we need to get back on our 5-pin to 3-pin. So it's carrying basically the same information in a different way, or how would you put that in layman terms, the difference?
Okay, well, the simplest answer is pins 4 and 5 aren't used.
Okay.
In you know, the DMX standards, you know, which recently received its ANSI, you know, recognition as well. They kind of redefined that, and they said, all right, you have to only use 5 pins, and pins 4 and 5 are reserved, which basically means we're not doing anything with them anyway. You know, the reality is, to send DMX, you only need 3 pins. Manufacturers have found lots of different ways to use the other 2 pins since they were there. You know, some manufacturers sent 24-volt DC power. Others used it to send a second universe, another set of 512 channels. You know, others used it to try to create bidirectional communication. But as you know, as technologies continue to grow, remember we're building DMX on the RS-485 standard, which is, you know, almost 30 years old, I think, if my memory serves. It's more than 20 some
Sure.
years old, you know? And a lot's changed since then, for sure. You know, we went from you know, old communication technologies to broadband, you know, that we have now.
Yeah.
There's one manufacturer. Here's another prop I grabbed. You know, Nickelodeon, which makes CompuShow for Elation and that sort of thing. They have their interface that has a 5-pin connector.
Yep. Okay.
And you can choose inside the settings to have it send 2 universes of information out. And so we created a little breakout cable where now you have 2 3-pin, if I can get that showing the camera, 2 3-pin outputs from that 5-pin.
Sure.
So that's one way, you know, that we've utilized that. If we take a look at this device here, which is a 5-pin to 3-pin converter, there is no Keebler magic. Quite literally, pins 4 and 5 just aren't connected.
Aren't connected.
Not at all. So that's the short answer.
Sure, sure. So let's stick with the 3-pin XLR now. I've seen some wires where it is a 3-pin XLR and the other end is a 1/4 inch. I've seen some situations where it's a 1/4 inch where it's a tip sleeve, and some where it's a tip ring sleeve. Let's look at the one where it's a tip sleeve. What kind of connection? I mean, that's a microphone connection, I'm assuming. But well, what's the difference?
We've left DMX behind now, for sure. So.
Yep. We'll leave DMX because I'm sure there's people who are like scratching their heads. So we're going to let them have a break, and we'll go to something simple for a minute, maybe.
Yeah. We're not talking about DMX anymore. It was, yeah, I was going to tell a story, but I won't. We'll just leave it alone. So, it involves TRS and DMX, and it doesn't need to be said. So, all right, let's see what I got over here in the props department. So what you're referring to is a TS connector like this.
Yep.
Tip
sleeve, yeah.
Okay, as opposed to a TRS connector.
Yes.
Which is, I can get that to shine in the light there.
Yep, we can see it.
Can you? Okay, good. Tip ring sleeve. And really the takeaway here is that we have 2 conductors, 1, 2, and here we have 3 conductors, 1, 2, 3. So we can only have an unbalanced audio signal with this.
Okay.
And that could be, you know, a number of things. An instrument, for example, an unbalanced line, something like that. With this, we could have either 2 unbalanced lines, like your headphones, common, and then left and right on the tip and ring.
Okay.
Which is why this is sometimes referred to as a stereo connector. Because we could have, you know, right, left, common, on the you know, rings and the sleeve.
Sure.
Or just like our DMX. Excuse me. Now I did it. Oh,
yep, you did. Now you're really going to confuse us, man.
Sorry to those kittens wherever they are. As opposed to our XLR connector, we also have 3 conductors, so we could do exactly the same thing here. And what we would do is we would tie pin 1 on the XLR to the sleeve, pin 2 to the tip, and pin 3 to the ring, and we could have a balanced audio signal on this.
Now, does that configuration of pin 1, pin 2, pin 3 to the different components, is that consistent, or are there times where those would need to be crossed, or they may be crossed in a wire?
It's supposed to be consistent.
Okay, supposed to be consistent. We'll just leave it at that, because I remember way back in the day, was it one of the lighting manufacturers, and we're jumping back to DMX, but they had the thing where their wires were intentionally crossed, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, now you've jumped back to DMX, and that suits me just fine, being attention deficit. But
I'm just saying that there have been in the history. So if those of you are wondering why I brought that up, is that it has been known that wires have been made specific for specific purposes. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. In DMX, pin 3 should be the data true, and pin 2 should be the data complement, which means pin 3 is what we would call the plus, and pin 2 is the minus, and then pin 1 is the drain. In audio, and this is sort of a recent development, really. Actually, if somebody's got some older gear, from the 80s or 90s, they might actually see some screen printing on the outside of it that says pin 2 hot, because it didn't used to be agreed upon. And the AES, Audio Engineering Society, got together and said, all right, enough's enough. We're going to agree that pin 2 is positive. Let's all just get along with that, because otherwise, you may have to start, doing polarity inverts and those sorts of things. This can create a lot of confusion. In fact, I was in a stadium for a professional football team's game, and I was working on something else, and just happened to get dragged into a kind of a broadcast problem, because they were trying to patch audio for a broadcast from one of the radio announcers, and they were going into a balanced XLR connection, and they were coming out of an unbalanced quarter-inch connection. And they said, well, we have all the adapters in here, but nothing's coming through. And because they had found the pieces that would connect together to get it from point A to point B, but they didn't do anything with the fact that the signal was different, and they were now actually shorting out the signal in the middle of that process. So without getting, if I had the whiteboard app here today, I'd draw it up for you, and but anyway, long and short of it, they didn't have any audio in the broadcast, and they couldn't figure out why, and it was a matter of just switching a few things around. And I started drawing it out and explaining it to them, and that's when they said, "Yeah, we don't care. Glad it works. Thanks. Leave now." So I went back down to the booth I was supposed to be working in, and and whatever.
Mind my business again. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about the DMX a little bit. We've talked about the tip ring sleeve. One question I have about the tip ring sleeve and when you're talking the quarter-inch jack, would that technology, we'll call it for lack of better, if we're doing tip ring sleeve on both ends, can that run over a longer distance as a audio or DMX wire without, does it have the same type of shielding typically as those would? Specifically an audio wire, obviously.
If I understood your question correctly, you're talking about TRS, but you're asking about
tip ring sleeve.
Yeah, length of signal propagation.
Right. Do you have the deterioration? I mean, does the shielding? Do you have the shielding in that wire as you would an audio XLR type of cable, a microphone cable?
It depends.
There's depending upon the quality of the mic and what its purpose is, I suppose. The
short answer is, again, just like XLR is a connector and has nothing to do with whether it's audio or DMX, TRS is just a connector. I see these used on scoreboards and everything else. Certainly, if we change the question to say, if we had a balanced audio signal on this connection and an unbalanced audio connection on this connection, TRS, TS, which would be preferential for a longer run, balanced hands down. But again, it has way more to do with the cable in between the ends, and also, and ultimately, most importantly, the signal that's being carried on those cables. Okay. You can't have a balanced connection in audio with this. So this guy would be out. He's gone. So, yeah. I just threw it behind me for dramatic effect. I don't know if it showed up on camera, though. So.
Yeah, it did. It went right over your shoulder.
All right, hey. I hope we don't need that again.
Yeah, it hit the backdrop. The backdrop just fell down, and now we're we're back in your living room again. It's great.
I'm actually down at the office here, so it'll be my living room even better.
Okay, so we've talked about the different types of wires a little bit, and the components of. Now, when a guy has had wires for a number of years, there's things that happen to them, and they shorts, what have you. Is there a way to test these wires to find out if a wire is bad? Because that's a big thing. We have a problem, and it's like, is it a bad wire, or is it a bad is a fixture or something, or the speaker or amp not working? How can a guy test wires?
Well, I've spent a long time in my career perfecting the process of becoming a wire whisperer.
Speak to me, wire.
That's right. I don't know where that came from. I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh, that coffee must have been a little strong earlier.
Yeah. You said if I made it past 2 episodes, I wouldn't get canceled. So I don't know all this stuff. There are a number of ways to. No, there it is again.
I was going to say, yeah. Send your comments to Twitter okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, number of ways to test. We'll get back to.
There's a number of ways you can test it. One of the fundamental rules of troubleshooting is to start with the simple things, and there's 2 reasons. One, they're probably the cause, and 2, they're the fastest to check. So rather than spending a great deal of our time on trying to figure out if some kind of a poltergeist has manifested itself in our system, we should start with simple things. And cables are certainly one of those things because they endure a lot of abuse. They get coiled up and uncoiled and stepped on and tugged and all those sorts of things. So we should check those first. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different cable testers on the market. This is kind of a simple, low-cost one that I keep handy at all times. It tests. So here we can see, speak on NL8s. So we've got RJ45s, USB, and then we got a whole host of other options here.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry to line it up on the camera. Where we can test various things that are going on in there. It's basically a glorified continuity tester, though. It just says what's coming in this end and what's coming in this end. And I can see if something's not making it, or if something has been, wired incorrectly, or if I'm just using the wrong type of cable for the job, like we talked about in the football stadium. It isn't going to tell us things like, issues with frequencies in the cable and that sort of thing.
Right.
Particularly as you get into digital signals, and there's some, network testers for cat cables where a basic continuity tester like this might say, yep, all 8 pins line up and that's fine. But when we start running really high refresh rates and things of that of the signal, we might have some problems. So, but anyway, fundamentally, every DJ should have one. Every pro audio professional should have one of these for $30 or whatever. It's indispensable.
Sure. And literally, you plug both ends of the wire in and jiggle the wire a little bit, or what would you recommend when testing a wire?
Well, the one prop I don't have is of complete wire. So, but basically, what we see here is we see an arrow. This says this is what's going in this end, and this says this is what's going in this end.
Right.
And 2 rows of LEDs correspond. So, we would expect to see pin 1 to pin 1, pin 2 to pin 2, pin 3 to pin 3. If we were making a polarity invert cable like we talked about, then we would expect to see 2 to 3 and 3 to 2. Mm-hmm. So it basically just gives us a visual idea of what's going on. And if we don't see the lights coming on, then we know we don't have a connection. Or maybe we see an unintentional short, but it's going to give us a quick view within seconds of what's going on inside the cable.
Nice.
So, everybody should have one of those, really. So
Nice. And they can get one of those on your website?
Yeah, we do have several options. Unfortunately, this one here isn't available anymore, and I'm working desperately on that because it was such a tremendous value, bang for the buck. There are some other ones that are similar to it that are out there that are a bit more expensive, and I found that one to be a good value. So hopefully we'll have some good news for your viewers in the near future. But there are no shortage of other options. There are lots and lots of cable testers out there.
Cool.
And we can sell you one.
There you go. You can pop online and check it out.
Well, since we're turning this into an infomercial, I will say this. If you find that you have a problem, and it happens to be with one of your NLFX Platinum Series cables, which probably isn't going to happen, but if it does, they're guaranteed for life. Just drop me a line, and or anybody here at the NLFX headquarters, and we will happily take care of that for you.
Sure. Sounds great. If they have questions, they can get a hold of you on Twitter. Right there. You can see that right below us, the @NLFXBen, or you can do the hashtag NLFXBen. Either one. Questions, comments, thoughts. If you've got a T-shirt that you think he doesn't have, send him the link.
Please
send him the link, because he wants to have a wardrobe. I mean, his wife has got so much of the closet, and then there's Ben's geeky T-shirts.
I've actually been. I'm on probation. I'm on T-shirt probation. A lot of times when I work on tour shows and stuff, they have crew T-shirts and things like that, and I've literally just started giving them away to friends. Oh, you're a so and so fan. Here you go.
Here you go.
Oh wow, it says staff crew. That's great. Nice. I'm banned from bringing more shirts home. But if it's a geeky shirt and it's cool, I will.
It will make it to the office.
I will risk I will risk whatever punishment my wife wants to dole out to me. But we have our anniversary in just 5 days, so she's
nice.
We're making it another year here. So
woohoo! And you probably got big plans.
Not really. I think we're going to kind of enjoy it. For a guy that spends as much time on the road like I do, I think we're going to do maybe a nice dinner and just kind of a nice quiet night at home and just enjoy each other as the human beings that we said we want to spend our lives together. So we're going to try doing a little bit of that. Yeah,
and I guess that must mean that we're getting old when I hear you say that, and I think, wow, that's a nice night.
Yeah. My idea of vacation is just staying home.
Stay at home and go out for a little dinner with that's good stuff. Good stuff. So one more time, if you got questions, Twitter, NLFX Ben, check that out. Last week's episode was up. We have actually a couple of weeks now. This is week 3. You can check those out on our YouTube page, which is youtube.com/discjockeynews, or you can go to DJNTV.com, and we've got them there at the very bottom of the page. You'll be able to find our episodes, which this is one of them. So once again, Ben, thank you very much for another great Tuesday night episode.
My pleasure, John. It's a lot of fun.
Good stuff. Good stuff. We'll be back again next week. Send your questions in. This is John Young with the Disc Jockey News. Good night. And